Let's face it, the CompTIA Security Plus is not an easy exam. Today, I'm going to be telling you everything you need to know to set yourself up for success in the Security Plus, so stay tuned. So if you've been following the channel for a while now, you know I have a video about the Security Plus. Knowing what I know now, I felt that it was a perfect time to revisit this. This guide is going to blow the doors off of the old video. So stay tuned because I think that will be an awesome guide on giving you everything you need to know to set yourself up for success in the Security Plus. There's a fair amount of information out there about the Security Plus exam. And if you Google it, like the top 7 tips to the Security Plus, you're gonna get some answers like eat a good breakfast or get a good night's sleep. These are not gonna help you pass the exam. I promise that I will not waste your time with any tips like that. Everything that I'm going to be telling you today in this guide is going to directly help you pass the exam. So before we get into it, let's talk about why I'm updating this video. My goal with this video is to get every one of you to pass the Security Plus. On my old video, there was nothing better to me than all of the comments that I saw with people who revisited the video and shared their experiences on the exam and told me that they passed the exam. This totally made my day, and I really hope that we could continue this with this exam. I think that with all the information that I'm going to be providing today, it'll really set you up for success. So just get a notepad out and get ready to take some notes because we're going to get into some serious detail. So this video is going to be broken into 4 main sections. The first section is going to be strategies on how to pass the Security Plus. The next section is going to be on my preferred study method and then the materials that accompany that study method. The third section of this video is going to be commonly asked questions that students often ask that we see in the comment section, stuff that people email me. I'm just going to be addressing those in this video to hopefully just save you some time and really answer these in an upfront manner. And then finally, we're going to be just discussing a reasonable timeline and just how to set expectations for studying for this exam. So without further ado, my mic is low on battery, so we're going to get right into it. The first thing that we want to do when we're taking on any new challenge is to size up the opponent. And that's basically what you're doing here by watching this video, so congrats to you. And some additional steps that we can do to really scope out our plan for this is to really get a better understanding of this exam. And what's the best thing that we can do to get the best understanding of the exam is to go right to the source. So the first thing that we're going to be looking at is the CompTIA exam objectives. We're going to be looking at these first because these are really the golden standard. Every other resource that is out there on the Security Plus is going to be third party. So you really want to make sure you're focusing most of your effort on the first-hand CompTIA objectives and sub-objectives. These objectives are going to help you keep on track, and then they're also going to help you make sure that you're studying the correct materials. So we're going to look at them in the beginning, and then we're also going to look at them in the final week before the exam just to make sure we've accomplished every one of the objectives and making sure that the resources that we've used that are from third parties, that they didn't miss anything that is actually one of the CompTIA objectives. So when we're sizing up our opponent and really just understanding the Security Plus exam, we need to understand the actual exam itself. So the exam consists of 90 questions, which are a mixture of multiple choice and performance-based questions. If performance-based questions is a new term to you, don't worry about that. We're going to be covering that later on in the video. But for now, you just need to know that they're more of hands-on type questions. And there's going to be a lesser amount, obviously, than the multiple choice, because the multiple choice are going to make up a large majority of the exam. So we really need to know how to approach these multiple choice because in my opinion, understanding how to take on these multiple choice questions in a strategic, structured manner will actually be one of the keys to the success within this exam. So now we're going to talk about how to approach the multiple choice questions. The CompTIA multiple choice questions are actually structured in a really interesting way that trips up a lot of people. So they're going to consist of about 4 or 5 multiple choice questions, and the answer is going to actually ask for the selection that is the best choice. And this is what really trips people up. In addition to the wording of the question, you also have to identify which of the answers is the best choice. And this is going to be hard because all the answers that are selected by CompTIA are going to be pretty darn similar. What this means is that you really have to know your stuff. So there's going to be a lot of terms that are really going to be similar. Out of the 5 questions, you're probably going to be able to, through process of elimination, you're going to probably be able to eliminate 2 out of there right away. They're just not related to the question. And then you're probably going to have 3 that are related to the question in some way. You could probably get rid of 1 more of them just based on your knowledge and your understanding of the question. But then it's the time where you want to go back and you really want to make sure you understand what the question asks, because this is where it gets really difficult. You need to understand how the remaining answers really relate to the question and what their question is asking. When I was taking this exam, I really had a hard time understanding what was going on in the question. So I took the approach of just rereading the question twice before even looking at the answers. I think that some students will breeze over the question, look at the answer choices, see some that are familiar, and then go back up to the question again. And that's really going to mess them up because they're going to have those answers in their head, and that might frame the question in a different way than CompTIA is actually putting it, and that might throw them off. So the one thing I want you to take away from this is read the question twice, really understand what it's asking, and then go down, eliminate the answer choices that are not relevant at all. And then once you have identified maybe 2, hopefully not 3, of the multiple choice questions that are remotely possible, then go through in your head and actually just define what each of those answer choices are in the most formal definition that you know, because doing it this way and kind of pulling them out from the actual context of the question will really help you and eliminate any other factors that might be influencing it. But if you're really stuck and you have a 50-50 guess, go with your gut instinct. I've always found that going with my gut instinct, especially on these tests, is the way to go. These questions can really get in your head, and I've just found that your first intuition is going to be mostly the right one, because otherwise you're going to be reading about it, reading the questions, reading the other answer choices, and just overthinking it in general. So go with your gut. So let's try out this approach in an example question. So I'm going to cut over to that screen, and we're just going to kind of take a look at how I break this apart and analyze each of the answer choices. Now, one disclaimer, so this question is from examcompass.com. I like their practice questions. I'm going to actually include a link to them. They're just free practice questions, and it's a great way to get your hands on some similar information and some similar questions that CompTIA poses. But one thing I have to warn you is that these questions are definitely not as difficult as the CompTIA questions. The questions are a lot more straightforward in here, and the CompTIA ones are going to be more situational. So just take that into account, but I did want to leave you with something like a actual example. So let's get right into that example right now. So the question is, a modification introduced to a computer code that changes the external behavior, example, maintains capability between a newer OS and an older version of the application software, is called, and then our options here are shimming, DLL injection, refactoring, and backdoor. So this is a really good example question. Like I said before, the question itself is gonna, on the CompTIA exam, is gonna have a lot more confusing things in there to actually throw you off. But the main thing that I see in this is the example statement, right? So it says to maintain capability between a newer OS and an older version of the application software. I immediately picked this out because this is the most specific component of this question, right? So you have to really pick out the actual specific thing that will eliminate the other questions, because there are a lot of these choices are modifications that you can introduce to computer code that change the external behavior, right? So let's actually step through it. So I know here that shimming pertains to maintaining the capability between multiple versions, right? So that's exactly what I picked out here. But imagine that wasn't the first answer, right? So let's just run through our other options. DLL injection. So DLL injection is a form of an attack, but does this maintain capability between newer OS and older versions of the software? No. Does it apply to the first part of the question? Yes, it actually does influence the change of the external behavior. So you really need to focus on the actual part that you got to pull out that the actual question's asking. So next, moving on to the next answer choice is refactoring. That's just making changes to the code structure. So we're going to eliminate that one. That's one of those obvious ones. And then we can just get rid of backdoor right away, because this is not something that's going to be used to maintain compatibility, right? This is going to be something that's malicious. We're going to be calling out to maybe like our C2 server, or we're going to be calling out to some other thing. It's going to be making a change to the code, but it's not going to be related to the compatibility. So we're going to have to choose shimming. Shimming is definitely our best answer here. It's the only thing that actually pertains to compatibility. So hopefully this approach just really helped you understand the structured way to approach these questions, to really understand the question, and then to best apply that question to the answer choices. One thing I want to leave you on before I leave the multiple choice questions is just really focus on understanding the questions. If you looked at the last one we went through, there were almost 2 questions there, or 2 aspects of the questions that we could pull out answer terms and apply to the answer terms. But the example with the parentheses around it, that's what really stood it out, and that's kind of what it was asking. So that's why I went with shimming there. So now it's time to talk about study strategies. Everyone has their own approach. I'm sure that you all have taken multiple exams over the years, maybe other certifications, and you all just have different approaches of doing this, but I would just like you to consider this approach that I'm proposing. So my approach is just really approaching the material from as many different angles as you possibly can. So what that means is that there are 4 main learning styles, right? So it's auditory, we have reading, writing, we have visual learners, then we have kinesthetic or hands-on learners. And my approach, and what I've proven over the years for myself that works, is to emphasize every one of these aspects, because I find that if I just focus on maybe just reading a book, or I focus on just watching a course, or for example, just listening to an audio course, I'm really missing out on a lot of potential there, because I get burnt out if I just do one aspect. So you really gotta vary it up. And when you vary it up, you also have to identify the proper study materials that work for you. So let's talk about the study materials that worked for me and that worked for a lot of people in this community and a lot of people that I know. So in my opinion, the best way to really hit all 4 of these different learning areas is to, number 1, get a book, read the book first. Number 2, you get a video course, watch the video course. The video course will further emphasize the topics that are in the book. And then I find that whenever there's a serious overlap, so for example, the author of the book and the author of the video course are emphasizing one topic, that's really where you want to note that topic down and make sure you really have that handled, because there's a reason that they're both pointing this out. That's going to be a serious topic on the exam. And then finally, you want to get your hands on as many possible practice exams as possible. So I'm going to include links to all of my favorite study materials in the description below. So my favorite book is the Daryl Gibson book. My favorite video course is the Pluralsight course. One of the advantages to the Pluralsight course that I've also found is that when you do the Pluralsight course, you're getting a membership, a flat rate membership to all of their other courses. So when you finish, if you like the learning platform, you can continue on with other topic areas that interest you, and you also can move on to your next certification like the CYSA or the Pen Test Plus. And then next, you have to get your hands on as many possible practice questions as possible. So if you're like me and you really like practice questions and you just rip through all the ones that are in the book, you're probably going to want to get your hands on some more. I think that for me, this is a really good way to kind of emphasize everything that I've learned. And also, like I said before, you catch these trends when you have diverse resources like this. So if something gets mentioned in the book, the video, and it's in a lot of practice questions, that's definitely something that's going to be on the exam and you're going to want to get your handle on. So I'm going to include a link to a practice booklet. This is just going to have straight up practice exams. It's going to have hundreds of practice exams with the answers and full-on explanations. So I think that this is a great way. If you don't want to buy this resource and you're not crazy about practice exams, you can also go on to a site like I mentioned before, like Exam Compass. Exam Compass has, I believe, about 15 to 20 quizzes, and each one of these quizzes actually consists of about 15 to 20 questions each. So that's a lot of questions. So one bonus tip is if you're like me and you really like your practice questions and you just burn through, for example, the test booklet that I linked down in the description, one of the approaches that I like to do is when you've completely run out of questions, or if you're just trying to take your time and really understand everything that's going on, is to take the question, and for each question and for each answer choice, answer to your head, to yourself in your own head, why is this answer not the correct one, right? So you're going to be doing that 4 or 5 times per question, and that's really just going to emphasize all 5 of those. So that's like 5 sub questions per question. And if that's something that works for you, take that to the exam. It will totally help you pass this exam as long as you can figure out how to do that in a timely fashion. So now that we've identified our material and we've identified our study approach, we need to figure out how to hold ourselves accountable. And let's face it, success in the Security Plus is really dependent on your long-term commitment and preparation. It's not something you can do the Friday before the exam, I'm sorry to tell you. The best way you can hold yourself accountable for the Security Plus is to set your exam date as soon as you start studying. So personally, it took me 3 weeks to get ready and pass the Security Plus exam. This was an extremely tight time frame. I would not recommend it at all. I had a lot of previous experience, and I was currently at the time back then working an internship where I was using a lot of the topics that were on the exam. So it wasn't all new material for me. And the one thing that really did help me get it done in 3 weeks is I knew that I had to get back to school, and I knew that when I started my classes, because I had a pretty intense course load at the time, I knew that I needed to set the exam and hold myself accountable. So I set it right at the week before school, and I knew that I was going to pass it that week, and I was just going to get it done with and move right on into school. Of course, you don't have to set a 3-week deadline. I personally recommend, if you're on the faster end, you have some experience, and you just kind of wanted to get this exam over with, 30 days. So before you even crack open the book, set the test date, schedule it for 30 days out. If you want to allow yourself a little bit more time, maybe allow an extra week at the back end to just fully go through your information again that you bookmarked, or just take an entire week to do practice exams, set yourself up for 45 days. No matter which it is, I would just recommend for you to identify what would be a sweet spot of a timeline. I really think that this 30 to 45 days is good, because any shorter, you're going to be rushing way too much. You're not going to be understanding the material. And any longer, and you're going to get too complacent about it, and you're going to let it slip a little bit, because you really need to be on it every single day if you want to hit it in this time frame and you want to get all this information in, because it's a lot of information to get in. So if you set your exam date and you still don't feel like that's going to hold you accountable enough, I really recommend to break out the individual components, and I'm going to discuss this more in the timeline. I actually made a pretty cool infographic that I'm pretty proud of that I'm going to show at the end, and I also have on my blog post at Cyber Career School, and I'm going to link that as well. But basically, this is going to have the timeline. So allow yourself maybe just say 3 weeks to finish the book, and then have another milestone of the next week to finish the course, and then the next week after that to work through all your practice exams. If you set these intermediate milestones, that's really going to help you hold yourself accountable. So now that we set the materials in our study plan, we developed some milestones, and we held ourselves accountable, let's talk about how to actually study. So I really recommend starting off with the book. Like I said before, my favorite book is the Get Certified, Get Ahead by Daryl Gibson. I think that this is a proven book. Most students who take the exam have this book. I personally read the book, and I passed it on to my 2 younger brothers who currently are Security Plus certified as well, and they both had great results with this. So if you're worried about the book, just go with the proven book, the Get Certified, Get Ahead by Daryl Gibson. Without getting too off topic though, this book initially has an exam, right? A initial assessment before you even get into the coursework or the chapters. Take this exam and treat it like the real thing. This can be one of the biggest benefits for you, because you really got to know where you stand and set this baseline initially. Set aside 90 minutes. This initial assessment is not going to have the performance-based questions, but it's going to have a good amount of multiple choice questions, and just treat it like the real exam. So don't use any outside resources. And then when you get done with the exam, tally up your results and see where you stand. So the passing score on the Security Plus is going to be an 83%. You need to account for the fact that there are no performance-based questions, and just the questions in the Daryl Gibson book are just a little bit easier than those of the Security Plus. Those are all just things you need to understand when you're juggling your score. But if you scored anywhere from about 60 to about 75% and you're worried, do not be worried. That is really a good score to start off with. Think about it. You know 60% of the exam objectives basically before even starting the reading. So that's a great place to start. And if you scored less than that, don't worry at all. I think most of the time when people do poorly on the initial assessment, it's not because they don't know the topics or they're really just struggling on specific areas. It's more that they just need to get into the mindset and understand how to do well on these multiple choice questions. So in the back of the book, there's actually going to be a full explanation on every one of the questions in this initial assessment, and then in all the chapter assessments as well. And this is going to really be your key. Do not let a single question go by that you didn't understand and then you also didn't look up in the back of the book. Really make that connection of why you got the answer wrong so you're never going to do it again. Another bonus tip for you guys, and I found this to be really helpful when I was taking the exam, is especially with the chapter questions, not as much with the initial assessment questions, but you can still do it, but there's just a lot of them, so it's going to be a lot harder to kind of gauge where you're at. But with the chapter assessment questions, I usually aimed for to only get one wrong, right? But I was really hard on the grading of those questions. So if I didn't know the answer to a question completely, so even if I brought it down to 2 and I did an educated guess between the 2, I still marked it as wrong and I went back and reviewed it. I think that this is extremely important because if you're doing these chapter assessments and you're guessing between 2 of them, and the question could be worded a little bit differently on the exam, for example, you could still get it wrong. And I really just go for as much completion as I possibly can get when I'm doing this preparation, so I know that I can go into the exam with extreme confidence. We talked a lot about the multiple choice questions and how to approach them. Let's cover some of the performance-based questions now. So these performance-based questions are often referred to as simulations. So if you've heard the term simulation, it's all the same thing. And this is basically going to be a interactive drag and drop style, for the most part, question that CompTIA does to say it's more hands-on. I really don't think it's hands-on at all. It's basically just drag and drop, which is just an abstraction of multiple choice if you really think about it. But don't let me get too far off topic here with that. Many people really stress the performance-based questions. I really don't think that they're hard, and I don't think you should worry about them that much. I think that the multiple choice requires a lot more understanding and a lot more finesse with your understanding of the questions than the performance-based questions. There are also some example performance-based questions out there, so if you search around on YouTube, you can find them. The one thing I just want to leave you on is do not stress these. There's very few of them, maybe like 5 performance-based questions. The one strategy that I do want to tell you is I would skip these right off the bat. I know that's a really common strategy. Maybe just look at them, glance at them when you start the exam, but don't let them get in your head. So just understand the topic, understand the question, put it in the back of your mind, answer the multiple choice question. Half the time the multiple choice question is going to prompt you to better understand the performance-based question and even maybe give you some hints or some answers towards that question. So just don't worry about it. I don't think you should stress about the performance-based questions at all. So maybe the biggest tip that I'm going to be giving you is to link relevant concepts. It kind of sounds obvious, but I think that a lot of people really are just trying to memorize these individual facts, right? So there are going to be definitely things on this exam that you have to memorize. You have to memorize acronyms. You have to memorize ports. But you don't have to memorize these individual concepts that are on the exam and the specific domains and objectives on the exam. I think it's really important that you want to link them. Like I always say about the Security Plus exam, it's a mile wide and an inch deep, right? So if you have to memorize this massive span of topics and objectives, you're going to spend all day, and by the end of the exam, maybe a week after the exam, you're going to forget it, because let's put it this way, memorization just does not do it in this field. You need understanding, and you need to just link these relevant concepts. Focus on really linking these concepts from the beginning. You're not going to be cramming it on the last day, right? Because you're not going to be having to memorize these abstract terms in isolation from each other. So I just want to point out one main thing before I leave this strategy is we obviously want to quickly and efficiently learn the information to pass the exam, but we're also paying this money and we're spending this time to understand the underlying concepts and build our foundation as cybersecurity professionals. What's the use if you just flash memorize, like flashcards, memorizing all these different concepts, is if you forget them 3 weeks after the exam. If you focus on understanding them and linking the concepts, understanding how they work, when you actually go into your specific vertical or your different role within the field of cybersecurity, you're going to be able to actually call on this to further understand the more advanced concepts. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so those were some strategies on the exam. Let's talk about some common questions. I think if I address these questions here, they may leave all of the viewers with some assurance and just with those lingering questions answered, so they don't actually have to go out to other platforms and feel maybe intimidated to ask them. So the first one is the Security Plus hard, and how does it compare to something like the A+, the Network Plus, the CYSA, or the Pen Test Plus? Comparing the Security Plus to all the exams that I just mentioned, I would actually tell you that the Security Plus, for some, might be difficult than all of those other exams, just in the fact that the scope of this exam is so wide. Let me use the CYSA Plus for example. So the CYSA Plus goes pretty deep, but it just narrows in on one vertical of many that the Security Plus covers. So I think if you have a really good understanding of security and you're able to link relevant concepts, like I mentioned before, the Security Plus isn't going to be that difficult, and the CYSA Plus would be more difficult. But if you approach it in taking these different isolated areas or sectors of the Security Plus, it could definitely be more difficult than something like the CYSA Plus just because of the pure scope. So another question about the Security Plus is, are there any discounts out there for the Security Plus? Actually, yes. So a lot of people don't know that there actually is a student discount for the Security Plus. I believe that the discount is 40%, and I can link that in the description as well to direct you if you're a student. And the only restriction for this is you have to be a current student at a 4-year degree program, and I believe that some other degree programs are added in there. But this is something really big, because I think that a lot of people who are students are looking at this like an extremely big cost, because when you're in college, this $350 could be a lot. And taking 40% off of that could mean the difference between not taking the exam at all and taking the exam. So if the price has been something that's holding you up, consider getting that student discount and taking the exam. So the next question is, does the Security Plus require 2 years of experience? No, the Security Plus does not require 2 years of experience. This is a common thing that trips up a lot of people. CompTIA does state that they recommend 2 years of experience, but there's no hard prerequisite for any of these entry-level CompTIA exams actually, or even for like something like the CYSA Plus. So you just need to understand that they recommend it, but it's absolutely possible that this could be your first introduction to cybersecurity, and it really is a good introduction to cybersecurity. So if that's something that's been holding you up, don't let it hold you up. Just dedicate yourself to it. It might take a little bit more work, but get right into it and you'll do fine. So another common question is, will the Security Plus alone get you a job? This is a really hard one. It obviously depends on the times that we're in, if there's a serious boom in your area for cybersecurity professionals, or if there's an organization that's, for example, looking for Security Plus candidates for a specific task or for a specific client that they have to onboard for very quickly. But in general, if you just have nothing other than the Security Plus, it will be hard to get a job with just that. If you're in this situation, I'd recommend further building up your resume with some more certifications, getting involved with some community projects, and also just being able to find some other way, because you've demonstrated your paper knowledge at this point with the Security Plus, but I would come up with a way to demonstrate your hands-on knowledge, so contributing to a project or just even producing content on the internet, just something you can really show other than the sign-off from CompTIA. So because I had so many questions about time frame on my last video, I wanted to end off this video with kind of just providing a good time frame, a comfortable time frame for you to accomplish all of the information and material that is needed for this exam. So I've had a lot of fun putting this infographic together. It can be seen on my blog that I'm going to link, and I might put it in a pinned comment or I'll put it in the description. But we're just going to walk through the different phases and just so you know as a general timeline of where you should be at during the certain parts of preparation. So like we talked about before, week 0. Week 0, you're going to, before you even crack open the book, you're going to schedule the exam. You're going to schedule the exam and you're going to buy the book, the course, and the practice exams all in the first week. So there's no question. So you're all ready to roll come the next week. Week 1 through 3 is a good time to really get your hands in this book and just to go through the book and give it an initial pass. Try to understand all the areas that you struggled on in the initial assessment in these first couple weeks. So I would suggest that a good time frame to actually finish this book is 3 weeks. After 3 weeks, it's time to move on to the video course. Video courses, like we know, are a lot quicker than reading the book, and it's going to be information that you're already familiar with. So I would give yourself about 1 week. So week 4, I would suggest watching the Pluralsight course. So week 5, the objective of this week is solely just to practice. You've put in the work, you understand the materials pretty well, and this week you're just going to practice, practice, practice. Get your hands on as many practice exams and practice questions as possible. If you burn through all of them like I did when I was doing this exam, take my tip where I mentioned breaking the exam down into 4 or 5 different sub-questions and reasoning why each multiple choice question is the wrong answer and it doesn't fit. So finally, you're ready for the exam. I would say just don't cram before the exam. It's really not going to help you that much. And like I said before, I'm not going to point out those obvious things like eat a good breakfast or get a good night's sleep. But the one thing I want to tell you about exam day is to don't let anything knock you off your game. If the simulations give you problems, when I was taking both CompTIA exams, the CoSA Plus and the Security Plus, I had issues with both simulations. Don't let them knock you off your game. It's going to happen. At the end or during the exam, you can tell the proctor, and then afterwards you can let CompTIA know. But so if there is a problem, just don't let it knock you off your game. And this one little problem is not going to make or break your final score, but it could mess up your mindset enough to actually mess you up. So we made it through the ultimate guide. I really hope that you were able to find some valuable information from this guide. And please let me know if this helped, if you found some value. Provide some other value in the comment section if you think I missed something. I did a way more in-depth version of this on my blog at Cyber Career School, and I called it the Ultimate Security Plus Study Guide. So, like I said before, I really want to hear from you if you passed the exam and you found this helpful. So put that in the comments. And otherwise, please give this video a like and consider subscribing if you're not. Thanks for sticking with me all the way through it, and I'll see you next time. Good luck.